Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Guns for Hire. Welcome to the gun shop here on You Always Win. Now, before I get into today's topic, which is always, for some reason, a heated debate even now, I want to just briefly go over this because some of you actually tweeted me and said, hey, are you going to ever talk about, real world issues here on the gun shop, like the Ebola crisis and that sort of thing? The short answer is no. Well, I don't actually ever have a short answer. No, because I want the gun shop to sort of stay at its roots, which is video games and technology. Technology, obviously, because we're dealing with computers and other devices that have to do with actual video games. So the gun shop here on You Always Win will strictly be video games and technology. However, and I'm going to go into more detail at the end of this video, so if you want to see, if you're interested in that sort of thing, if you want to see other discussions of more serious worldly type issues, that I can actually help you with as well, because I do have my vlogging channel, which is called Life with Niels. It has daily vlogs on there, the family life, which again, I'll explain in the end, world trips, world adventures, and of course a new talk show called Why Not that goes on every Saturday, where we talk about more serious issues like Ebola and that sort of thing. So you can stay tuned if you're interested in that sort of stuff. I'll give you links to that in the description below and annotation links at the end of the video. So on today's show, I'm going to be talking about a particular article, and of course that link for this article is in the description below if you want to read it yourself, because I'm not going to be going into specific details. I'm not going to be trying to quote the individual verbatim, the name, and no offense, I'm not trying to be rude, but the name is irrelevant. I don't know the individual. All we need to know is that he's a game director or part of the one of the directors for Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed Unity. And the article, which is, I believe on GameSpot, goes into, and he talks about Assassin's Creed, both in terms of frame rate and resolution. In the first part of the article, he talks about why they chose 30 frames per second. Because, a big thing, frames, the frame rate and resolution nowadays, especially with the current gen, the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, there's always this debate. We see it every single time in articles. It's like, why isn't it this, or why is it that, or why is the Xbox One like this, and it can't do this, and the PlayStation 4 is like this. We're going to get into that, but I want to attack this article, sort of, not attack, but you know what I mean? Approach this article. Let's be friendly about it. Oh, there it is. Let's just approach it carefully. Don't want to spook it. We're going to go up to this, and we're going to talk about it in terms of frame rate first, which is what this particular individual at Ubisoft discusses as well. So the frame rate on Assassin's Creed Unity is 30 frames per second. The big hubbub was, why isn't it 60 frames per second? And he goes on to explain, he's like, listen, not everything looks good at 60 frames per second, particularly something sort of cinematic like Assassin's Creed. He says, a Twitch reaction type game like Call of Duty, I couldn't get that out properly there. Call of Duty, 60 frames looks good, especially when you're in that first person. But he explains that Assassin's Creed, it doesn't actually look good. It looks better at 30 frames per second. And he makes a comparison to the Hobbit movie. For those of you that don't know, the original release of the Hobbit was at, I believe, 48 frames per second. Standard movies, and I believe even television, is 24 frames per second. This is something that we're used to. It covers up really these little flaws or inconsistencies when they're in the action scenes. And it's what we're used to, in all honesty. When you go to the movies, you're seeing 24 frames per second. So when they released The Hobbit at 48 frames, it was more like a camcorder. It was more realistic, and everyone was kind of thrown off. They're like, oh man, this looks horrible. Even though it's the same effects, even though the coloration and everything like that was the same, but because it was twice the amount of frames, because they could see that much more movement, the cinematics didn't look good. When they finally released it at 24 frames per second, which you've probably seen, and majority of us have seen, even if you saw the 48, it looks normal. It looks better. It looks better as an action cinematic film. And that's kind of what this game director was explaining, is that although, yes, we could probably do 60 frames per second, especially on a PC. A lot of people like 60 frames per second, but it's not gonna look good. And I've got to say, for this particular one, I kind of agree. At least I understand where he's coming from. I haven't played it, obviously, but I understand what he's saying, and it does make sense to me because of the third person, because you're seeing the character versus the first person, which is immersive and that sort of stuff. You're looking at these cinematics, these moves, and all that, the cutscenes, just even having it in third person, seeing your character on there. I could see why 30 frames per second would actually look better than 60 frames per second. Now again, this may change. I'm not saying all third person games will look better, you know, at 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second. I'm not saying that, but you know, a solid 30 frames, no stuttering or anything like that in the frame rate, especially if you have 60 frames per second, but there's like a drop in frame rate, it looks choppy. Even if it's dropping down to 30, it looks really, really whack. It looks bad. But a solid 30 frames per second, especially if it's, you know, like Assassin's Creed cinematic, it's actually gonna look pretty good. Now this last part I'm gonna talk about, I got the feeling, and maybe it's just because the majority is silent, or we're only listening, or I only read sort of the loud minority. And by loud, I mean the ones that are voicing their opinion. You're the ones reading the articles, putting your comments down, watching videos, putting in the comments, because if you look at any video, any article, the number of people, let's say you get tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of views on a particular video, but you only see a fraction of that in terms of comments and a fraction of that in ratings. That's what I mean is the loud minority, because the people that actually comment are such a small portion of the overall people that are watching the video. They do not represent the majority. And the problem is that the majority are silent. Either they don't care, maybe they do agree, maybe they don't agree, but the ones that are passionate are the ones that are in the minority. So that's what I mean by that. I'm not discounting it, because we're all part of the same thing, and maybe it's a reflection of the overall majority, you know, it just happens to be voicing it. So what I feel like I'm in, you know, in the minority in terms of the views. If we look at the people that comment, and that is resolution of a game. Should games be 1080p every single time on the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One? Because it's the, you know, let's just go back a few. I like saying next gen because I know it's the current gen, but you know what I mean? Like when we're like, oh man, they're coming out and they're gonna be able to do this and they're gonna be able to do that. And then they're struggling to do it. And people are like, oh, it's not important. It doesn't need to be 1080p. And I agree that not every game needs to be 1080p. It doesn't need to be. When you're playing it, if it's at 900p and it looks good, you don't really care. You're not going, man, you know what, this game would be just a little bit better if it was crisper and the detail was there a little bit, you know? Yeah, maybe it will look a little bit better, but my point is that these machines that have just dropped, that are supposed to be sort of caught up, and you can't compare them with PCs. PCs, like I majority game on my PC. The same thing with Meatwagon. He uses the PC. Very rarely. I play console, my PlayStation 4 on the side when I'm taking a break. So majority on the PC, and it's easy to upgrade. It's easy to get the better graphics card without having to change everything, or a better processor, or put some additional RAM in it. Not so much with the console. Console's like, it's meant to be simplistic. Here's the console, put the game in, turn it on, play the game. You know what I mean? Very, very simple. So when they put out the next gen systems, they should be kind of coming up to the current state of the market or just slightly above. You know what I mean? That's kind of what they should be doing, but it seems in this case, they didn't even do that. They didn't even match, like, not even current. They didn't even match, like, you know, a year behind that. And it almost seemed ridiculous. And here's my point. Not every game needs to be 1080p, but the machines, these current gen systems, should damn well be able to actually play them. When a game, you know, requires it or is gonna be a lot better looking if it's 1080p, the machines that we are buying right now, you know, the current gen, should be able to support 1080p. They shouldn't be struggling. Where 720 should not even be on there. Any game on there right now should be capable of, I guess 900. I say 900, but 1080p should be the standard. I mean, we're already in the talks of 4K. I know 4K ultra high definition is not really even supported out there, other than some maybe small videos or some pictures and stuff like that. But we're on the cusp of that. Not being able to do 1080, which is, you know, old school, is kind of ridiculous. But let's get into something a little more specific, and that is, should Assassin's Creed have been 1080p? Why is it 900p? There was another article, and I believe that in the article that I linked below, they give a link to it and they talk about it. But they were basically, I don't know if it was accused or even Ubisoft itself explained that, listen, we made it 900p to make it, you know, to remove the arguments and everything between the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. Because it's no surprise, and this isn't, you know, me causing a fanboy war, this is just, you can look at anything out there right now, any article, it doesn't matter. so many times we're seeing these multi-platform games that are only capable of 900p on the Xbox One, 1080 on the PlayStation 4, and of course PC is capable of 1080 plus easily. And it's like, the article says, oh, we made it 900 so there's no argument. If anything, I'm seeing that it is an argument. What I don't want to see again for this next generation, and I don't mean to be fanning any fanboy wars here, but is a particular system, I don't care if it's the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4, depending on what it is. Why is it that whatever it is, you know, like the others have to suffer, the PC has to suffer all the time, although most of the time they're able to give you the options to juice it up. Why isn't it the same thing brought with the PS4? Why is it so different? It's like, oh, well, we don't want to cause issues with the consoles, you know, make favoritism. If the PlayStation 4 is capable of doing 30 frames per second, which is what you've chosen for your game, and 1080p, and it's capable of doing that without taking anything away, then why isn't that option there? Why is it you got to dumb it down, so to speak, just so that there's no arguments? If anything, I'm annoyed as a PlayStation gamer, and I've got the Xbox One and the PS4, but if I was to choose to buy it on the PlayStation 4, you know, why shouldn't I have the option of playing it at 1080 if it's capable of doing it? And you know that they're making it, well, I'm assuming if they did that for the PC, it's absolutely the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But is it necessary? Does that game need 1080p? No, it doesn't need 1080p, but if it looks better, I mean, he's talking about cinematics. This is where I have an issue with it. In the article, where he's justifying the 30 frames per second, right? So he's justifying, oh, well, it's better for a cinematic type game. Well, if it's a cinematic type game, wouldn't also a higher resolution making everything in the shadows and the particles and everything look a little bit crisper or look a little bit better? I don't understand. It seems like, you know, it's like justifying something based on, you know, cinematics and then totally ignoring that when you're talking about resolution. Because cinematics, let's face it, look a lot better if the resolution, if you're talking about 360, you're watching a trailer of this amazing movie or like a National Geographic, you know, going through the canyon or floating, and you're watching a documentary, and you're talking about cinematics, you're like, oh man, it doesn't matter. Put it out in 480p versus 720, or put it out in even 420 versus 1080, or 720 versus 1080. You're talking about cinematics. If you're gonna bring that up, 1080p is a huge factor of it, and yet they seem to discount it. This Ubisoft director is like, oh, no, it doesn't matter. It looks gorgeous. You can't use an argument for something and then totally just, you know, toss it away when you're talking about a different aspect. I don't know. It just seemed a little bit odd. I mean, maybe I'm off my rocker. You know what I mean? I'm not, and like I said, there's certain games that don't need 1080p. You don't really care about it. Games like Call of Duty. Let's face it, when you're playing Call of Duty in your first person, the idea of that, especially like if you're going through the single player campaign, the idea behind Call of Duty and the Modern Warfare and all that other stuff is immersion. That, my friend, you know, you're talking about frame rate. Frame rate is probably important in that, and that's why it's 680, or 680. Let's just throw numbers out there. I'm getting all confused. 60 frames per second. It gives it that sort of fast, reactive, arcadey type feel. But at the same time, that first-person shooter sort of military simulation, the resolution, and even Battlefield gets this, that immersion, your ability to feel like you're part of the battlefield, is heightened when the resolution and the shading and all those other aspects are at max. The better the resolution in games, certain games like that, are way better. And yet everyone seems to be I should say everyone. So many people and so many things that I read, they discount it. Resolution may not be the focal point of every single game. It may not be the most important thing, and not every game needs it. But the machines should be able to do 1080p. The current generation machines should be doing 1080p. And there are certain games where resolution is actually just as important as any other aspect as part of the gameplay. I'm not saying that it's paramount, but you know what? Gameplay's up there, frame rate's up there, resolution is up there on certain games. To totally discount it, every time I'm reading articles, I see people saying resolution means nothing, is a ridiculous statement considering the type of games that we have today. Anyway, that's it. Those are my thoughts. How do you guys feel about that? Am I off my rocker? Any of you guys that are normally silent, please speak up. Am I the only one out here that, you know, feels this way? Like, I just feel like I'm going nuts. Like everyone's saying resolution means nothing. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. leave your comments below. And now I'm going to be talking about, I want to share again, like I said in the beginning, about, I was going to say leave the comments below. My mind goes so fast, doesn't it? Just slow down, man, for the love of God. I want to talk about the other channel for those of you that wanted some serious articles as well. So I'm going to give links in the description below. One is actually my trip to Puerto Rico that I did with my son Liam. And this is a long video. It's like about an hour and 20 minutes, but I take you for 3 days and I basically vlog every experience, and it was mind-blowing for me. And I'm not exaggerating. Like for me, we ended up going into hiking in a tropical jungle, and we were going through this, I'm looking at vines and giant trees and ferns, and we come across like this fresh mountain waterfall that's 30 feet tall, and we're swimming in it. Then we go in between the valley, between two giant mountains, jungles on the side, and we're swinging off a giant rope into this freshwater river that's collecting off the mountains with fish in it. And I was just like, oh my God, the food was amazing. You know, Battlefield 4, the Arecibo, the map Arecibo, you know, the giant, what is it, telescope or observatory, where you can drive underneath it, like it's like a giant satellite dish, you can drive on top underneath. We went and saw that, and when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, like that is amazing. And for those of you that are interested in stuff like more serious topics like the Ebola, very first talk show, Why Not, with my wife Pam, also known as Male Ace online and Twitter, we talk about Ebola. We also talk about some silly stuff as well there. So if you want more serious stuff, those links are in the description below. Anyway, that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys are enjoying the gun shop. I'm loving it. I'm love doing this, and I hope you guys keep enjoying doing this as well. Good times, people. See you guys next time.